Today's the first episode of Season 5. We're publishing this one on New Year's Day 2024. It's an opportunity for me to say thanks to you, our loyal listeners. We started this journey together. In 2019, we've now built a community of more than 20,000 fans around the globe. And we recently celebrated a big milestone, our 1 million download. And you know what? It feels like we're just getting started. Your energy, your feedback, your ideas really inspire us to work harder to bring you more important conversations about the future of AI and the future of humanity. Today's conversation with Wade from Zapier is an appropriate one to kick off the new season. We've been hard at work scheduling amazing guests for 2024. For me and our production crew, thanks for spending a little bit of your time each week with us. Now, Wade, take it away.
How can we use generative AI to help make this problem a lot easier? And there's two places we really started. One was helping people figure out, what should I automate? That, whether you're new to Zapier or you've been using Zapier a long time, a fair commentary we'll get is like, I love this. This is great. I still feel like I'm not using it to its fullest potential. I'm not sure what to do next.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome back to AI and the Future of Work. Thanks again for making this one of the most downloaded podcasts about the future of work. I'm your host, Dan Turchin, CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. I'm also an investor and an advisor to more than 30 AI-first companies, and as you know, a firm believer in the power of technology to make humans better. If you're passionate about changing the world with AI, or maybe just looking for your next adventure, let's talk. We learn from AI thought leaders weekly on this show. And of course, the added bonus, you get one AI fun fact each week. Today's fun fact, Kyle Wiggers writes in TechCrunch about the new ChatGPT Enterprise plan from OpenAI. ChatGPT Enterprise can perform the same tasks as ChatGPT, such as writing emails, drafting essays, and debugging code. The new offering also adds enterprise-grade privacy and data analysis capabilities on top of the standard ChatGPT, as well as enhanced performance and customization options. ChatGPT Enterprise provides a new admin console with tools to manage how employees within an organization use ChatGPT, including integrations for SSO, single sign-on, domain verification, and a dashboard with usage statistics. Shareable conversation templates let employees build internal workflows, leveraging ChatGPT, and credits to OpenAI's API platform let companies create fully custom ChatGPT-powered solutions if they choose. ChatGPT Enterprise comes with unlimited access to advanced data analysis, the feature formerly known as Code Interpreter. Interestingly, OpenAI is not yet publishing pricing for Enterprise. My commentary, for anyone who has ever shipped enterprise software, this clearly is really just an MVP version of what has been holding back customers from allowing ChatGPT usage by teams and even whole orgs beyond just individuals within companies. It's still not clear how it will compete with mature enterprise offerings with comparable generative AI capabilities from Microsoft, OpenAI's primary investor, as well as Google and presumably others like Apple soon. As always, we'll link to the full article in today's show notes. Now, shifting to this week's conversation, we've had amazing unicorn CEOs recently on this podcast, but today's a first. Wade Foster, CEO and co-founder of Zapier, grew his company to a $5 billion valuation in 2021 on a $1.3 million raise in 2012. Now, let that sink in for a minute. The power of product market fit and listening to your customers is impossible to overstate with this company. I assume most of you are heavy users of the product like I am. Wade and his co-founders, Bryan and Mike, launched Zapier in 2012 as part of the YC S12 batch. The company is now more than 800 employees in 40 countries. The product is used, dare I say, loved by 2.2 million businesses, and it integrates more than 5,000 apps that have been used to create more than 25 million Zaps or automated workflows. I really have been looking forward to this one. And gosh, without further ado, Wade, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the podcast. Let's get started by having you share a bit more about your background and the early days of the company, how you got into the space.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dan. You know, before Zapier, I grew up in central Missouri, and I didn't do much in tech until actually I was in college, and financial crisis hit, and was struggling to find a gig, and there was this tiny little software company in Columbia, Missouri, where I went to school, that was looking for a marketing intern, and I was like, I can probably do that. Let's see if I can convince them to do that. And so I went and got to go work at that company that summer, and just fell in love with the whole business model. It's the idea that you could make software, you could put it on the internet, and then somebody half a world away could find it, put a credit card in and buy something from you. Was just like, it blew my mind. I was like, that is so cool that you could create a business this way. We were working out of a professor's house too, and it was just like, it broke the mold on everything that I thought sort of corporate America could look like. That business, we learned I learned everything there. I was trying to figure out SEO and SEM and email marketing and social and direct sales and biz dev and all this sort of stuff, and just really couldn't make any of it work. It was so challenging, so hard. And eventually started to say, like, maybe it's not the marketing and sales that's the problem. Maybe we got to have a better product. And so started to teach myself the code, teach myself some product management, things like that. Which is when I started teaming up with my co-founder, Bryan. And Bryan and I, we also played a lot of music. I played saxophone, he plays his bass and guitar. And so we would be, playing in this blues and jazz quartet around Columbia, Missouri. But then we'd also be just pitching each other ideas here and there. What about this? What about that? Doing little side projects and things like that. And one day Bryan came to me and said, hey, what if we made it really easy for people to connect and integrate the web apps that they were using? This is late 2011. People were using things like MailChimp and QuickBooks and Basecamp and Zendesk and stuff like that. And they all had these V1s of their APIs, which the APIs opened up these packages to all sorts of interesting things, but you had to know how to code. And that was a non-starter for a lot of customers. In fact, you go look at the customer forums, and there'd be people saying, hey, when are you going to have an integration with this? And, there'd be like, yeah, I'd love that. I'd love that. I'd love that. And, someone would say, well, why don't you use the API? And people are like, I can't use the API. And then a product manager would come in and be like, we'll take a look. We'll see what we could do. Which, if you've ever worked in one of these companies, you kind of know is like, slim chance, probably not going to happen. So we thought, well, hey, maybe we could help with this. And it really resonated for me too, because, I'm not a great engineer at this point in time. I'm learning. I never was a great engineer, never have been a great engineer. And I'm working with the Marketo API, which is this old WSDL SOAP thing that's just, I'm really struggling with authentication and stuff like that. And I'm like, if this product existed, I would be doing it this way rather than that way. And so Bryan and I team up with Mike, and we build the first demo prototype at a hackathon, a startup weekend, and just had a lot of fun building it. And, as they say, the rest is sort of history from there.
What was the first integration that you published?
The first thing we had was we added 4 apps to that platform that weekend: PayPal, Highrise, Twitter, and SMS powered by Twilio. And so the first thing that I think that actually ever worked in production was, if you sent some money via PayPal, it would log that customer in Highrise, which Highrise was the CRM that Basecamp used to run.
So it's hard to even get this far into the conversation without talking about the potential impact of generative AI, or a layer of conversational AI. You told kind of the founding story and the hackathon story. What might a future interface look like for a zero code Zapier experience, where potentially you're speaking to the platform and it's generating Zaps on the back end for you? Is this something you and the team envision?
Yeah, I mean, you can already go start to play around with Zapier and see us experimenting in this area. I think, like many of us, we were inspired by the launch of ChatGPT and, what new capabilities that can unlock. And, I think one of the things we realize is, we went from this world where you had to know how to use APIs, you had to know how to code, to now Zapier. You've got this simple UI and you can configure integrations. And it's pretty easy, but there still is a fair amount of configuration that goes on. You have to map fields, you have to select your accounts, you have to go through these things step by step by step, and straightforward. But because of the sheer number of steps, it can just take time. It can be a burden. We started to go, hey, how can we use generative AI to help make this problem a lot easier? And there's two places we really started. One was helping people figure out, what should I automate? That, whether you're new to Zapier or you've been using Zapier a long time, a fair commentary we'll get is like, I love this. This is great. I still feel like I'm not using it to its fullest potential. I'm not sure what to do next. And turns out these generative AI tools are quite good at helping brainstorm with you. It's the classic rubber duck problem where it's like you go talk to the rubber duck and, well, it turns out ChatGPT can talk back to you and give you ideas and help you think through things. And so these generative AI tools do the same thing. And so, we put that at the very top of the funnel where you can start to say like, well, I work in marketing, or I'm a podcaster, or I'm an attorney, and, I use these types of tools, and these are the types of problems that I have day to day. What types of things that maybe can you help me out with? And, it'll generate some suggestions. So that's like the first thing. But not only can you have it start to generate suggestions for you, you can also say like, well, why don't you just go ahead and set that up for me? And that's the next place we're working on, is figuring out how can we take it from idea to actually fully implementing these things without you having to go through a UI at all. Or if anything, you're just there checking its work and saying like, hey, I think you got that right. Or like, close, but actually more like this, less like this. And so I think the power of generative AI is it lets you do those iteration cycles so quickly, and you can nudge and suggest rather than have to build and configure all from scratch.
I made the conceptual leap about who your ideal customer is, your ICP, your ideal customer profile. I know this is kind of a wonky, kind of a Silicon Valley kind of a question, but is that the right leap to make, that you're targeting what we call a zero code, low code kind of business analyst type, or even a consumer? Or what's the most common pattern?
That's exactly right. We looked, the initial problem was focused on these folks that are working in these businesses, and they're working with technology, but they're often blocked by their either one, they don't know how to code themselves, or two, they're having to lean on engineering or IT to help block them. And a lot of those requests go in a queue, and that queue can be a mile long. It gets deprioritized. And so, it can take months, quarters for them to get something done. And so with a tool like Zapier, they're able to just say, hey, I'm going to solve this problem for myself. And I'm going to make sure that, this thing that's been a blocker for me isn't a blocker anymore. And so we definitely have found a sweet spot in just like the sort of everyman, the line worker inside these businesses that is often the ones keeping the ship moving and, working with all these tools at the end of the day.
What you've achieved is almost impossible in the business community, in this space, in that the community that you've built is so loyal. And I referenced some of the metrics. I mean, the volume of Zaps is so large that without having to know what WSDL stands for, or ever having to have used SOAP as a protocol, mere mortals can go in and find what they need. And to your point about maybe generative AI being creative and helping you, discover things to automate, a lot of times there's no need for it because the community is so broad. Now, the flip side of that, though, is as Zapier has infiltrated the enterprise, to the CIO, that's scary, because we call that shadow IT, and now there's shadow AI, and we get anxious about what the every person might be able to do connecting internal systems. What is the other side of Zapier's approach to ensuring safety and data integrity while still providing this very easy, low code, no code solution?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's exactly what you just described, which is that in a lot of ways, Zapier is the solve for a lot of IT challenges. IT has this backlog of things that is a request inside their organization. They don't want to build these things. They know that they don't want to maintain these things. And so if they can equip and empower their workforce to do it on their own, but do it in a way that is safe, that protects the company's assets, that manages risks appropriately, that's a huge, huge unblock for the IT leader, the CIO. And so a big part of that is making sure that Zapier has the proper tooling to help them deploy it in a safe way. It's saying things like, hey, we'll create an allow list or a block list for certain applications. We'll create monitoring and alerting tools to let you know when certain things are authenticated or certain things are deprovisioned. We'll give you insight into where these things are being used and not used. And all these functionality then give that IT leader a level of oversight that allows them to say, hey, workforce, go use this tool, but now I have a mechanism to it's not in the shadows anymore. It's done in sort of, the light of day. And it allows me to go, okay, cool. That's awesome. I'm really happy that you figured that out on your own. Over here, oh, hey, slow down a little bit. Like, we need to get our roles and permissions sort of like cleaned up here to be able to do this in a safe way. So, that's really like the key way that I think you really make a CIO and IT leader feel like they're in the driver's seat versus, something's going rogue over here in the organization.
I hear every day from CIOs and CISOs that shadow AI is scarier than shadow IT because of just the vastness of what generative AI could potentially recommend. What are your perspectives on if generative AI potentially shares, maybe a Zap that contains malicious code, or, it might leave companies using Zapier open to prompt injection. How much of a responsibility does Zapier have to protect the integrity of stuff that might be spewed out from generative AI?
Well, I think this is a problem the whole industry is trying to figure out, is like, what's the right way to go about this? One simple thing that we've done is we have humans in the loop everywhere on this setup. So, you can't turn something on without a human reviewing it. Our ChatGPT plugin, you can't do it in an automated way. You have to click and say, okay, that looks good, send it away. And so putting in a human in a loop allows the AI to play an assistant role and say like, hey, we're gonna check it. And I think over time we might be able to find the capabilities to say, okay, we actually trust what it's doing here. It's consistent enough. It's predictable enough that we actually might let it do things in a more automated way. But early on, I think, a big part of this is trying to understand, what its capabilities are. What is it doing? What can we predict? What can we not predict? Et cetera. And so that's been our approach, is to, sort of do this in a bit of more of a step-by-step piecemeal way.
You've clearly defined a need for kind of that integration. Middleware seems like such an antiquated term, but that middle layer in between all of these applications. The application companies, though, obviously haven't slowed down on the pace of their development of integrations. What do you think about the kind of changing ecosystem as it gets easier to build these integrations? How does the role of that glue between all of them coexist with the vendor's own attempts to integrate and maintain those integrations?
Well, I think one of the things that we're going to see is a pretty big explosion in the amount of software that's about to be created. I think we certainly feel like there's been a lot of software in the last decade, but the reality is these generative AI models, I think, make it easier to build so much more. And the reality is, I think we all know intuitively that the demand from software far exceeds the supply. Any of us, when we look inside of our business, we see these mile-long lists of feature requests that we never get to. Some of them we intentionally don't do because it asks for a particular customization that we're like, it's just not, like, that's just not, and not enough people want this thing. Some of them are just, hey, like, we'd love to do it, we just don't have the time or the capability or et cetera to make it happen. But all of those feature requests reflect a person who says, you know what, I want my software to work differently than the way it does today. And for that person, the constraint is that they're also saying, I can't do it, or I don't want to do it, or I want a vendor to do it for me. Now enter generative AI and the capabilities it exposes. And now that same person might say, you know what, I actually think I could build something pretty darn close, or maybe exactly what I'm wanting, that these off-the-shelf vendors aren't able to provide me. And so I think what happens is you unlock this huge amount of demand for software, and you now generative AI creates the supply side where all of us can now create the software specifically the way that we want it. We can solve those feature requests. We can patch those areas that we don't like. And now all of a sudden, the amount of software that we've had over the last 10 years that's been created, you start to go, wow, how much more are we going to see? Are we going to see 100x more, 1000x more? Like, in some ways that seems low to me. And so when you circle back to like that middleware and the need for it, well, when you have so much software that exists, you're going to want portability. You're going to want to be able to sort of bring your data to the tools that you use. And so I think that like, that data layer, that pipe layer, and that ability to work with it, the application layer is just going to get the integration piece of it is just going to get more and more important.
We talk a lot on this podcast about the state of generative AI tooling and infrastructure. And a lot of times we come to the conclusion that we may be rapidly approaching what Gartner calls the trough of disillusionment, because the expectations are so astronomically high. And oftentimes, to your point about absolutely needing a human in the loop, like that's the responsible thing to do at this stage. I'm curious to know, as you mentioned, at one point you weren't a product manager or a developer, but you've evolved a lot in the last 10, 11 years. With your product manager hat on, how do you think about the right way to presumably either fine-tune an OpenAI model or get a model to be smart enough on Zaps, Zap code, integration patterns, knowing that if you're using a public LLM, you have to make sure that proprietary information isn't getting fed back to the LLM. What's kind of the LLM architecture that you've adopted that you've kind of settled on for the beta version?
Well, a lot of what we're using right now in our models is with OpenAI. And, we're comfortable with the terms of service and the things that they've set up there. But, we're paying attention to all the developments. We're looking at the Llama models. We're looking at, a whole host of these tools to see what are the capabilities and try and understand what do they provide. And, I think that's, you talked about the trough of disillusionment. And I think when something like ChatGPT comes out and the whole world gets a chance to play with this thing and see the magic of it, it's easy to want to rush forward and go, holy cow, like the world, the future world, it's going to be different. And it's going to be different in all these amazing ways. And it could be different in all these scary ways too, but it gets pretty exciting for someone like me. And then of course you start to play with it and you start to then bump into like, okay, it was really good at this, but these types of use cases is not so good at. Or over here, like, oh, this is amazing. I want to put this in production right away. And this spot, you're like, never, do I want to do that? And so that's where this trough of illusionment starts to come in, is you're like, okay, that future that I saw, it's like, it's not here yet. But the fun part as a product manager, as a developer, as a creator, as a builder, whatever you want to use for it, is we've now had a taste of it. We see like, like this thing that totally felt like something from sci-fi not that long ago, it actually feels like something that is going to happen not just within our lifetime, but within, the near-term future. And so the fun part is now, okay, how do we get rid of those barriers? How do we start to tear down those walls of places where it's like, it's not good at that stuff yet. Okay, well, what would have to be true to get that? And then you start, playing with the models, you start feeding it data in this way, you start nudging it in this way, and you see if you can get it to behave in the way that, you would want it to work in the future. So there's no like fancy silver bullets here. It's just the hard work of creation and building and trial and error and, trying to get the technology to behave in a way that you want.
So in the Entrepreneur Olympics, so far you've won at least 2 gold medals. I'll say one of them is you've achieved product market fit very effectively. And then the second that I think may be an equally impressive feat is that you managed to create a brand that has become a verb. It's up there with this is a huge compliment, a Kleenex, a Jell-O. You zap this, right? If you could just talk us through how intentional both of those were and maybe a little bit about the process of, I know it's 2 questions in one, but both the product market fit and how you've branded the company.
Well, the name is a fun story. We like I said, we started at this hackathon, and so we're trying to come up with a name pretty quickly. And Zapier's built off the back of APIs. And so we said, you know what? It would be pretty cool if we could fit API in the word. So the API in the middle comes from that bit there. Next thought is, okay, IER, like that's pretty common in English. So now we've got APIER is like a chunk. And then we say, well, is there something we could put, on the front of that we might like? And so we go, well, you put a Z on the front and you got Zaps and Zapier and all that sort of stuff. The one failure point is that Zapier, Zapier, we get that name. So that's the one part we maybe missed on the branding front. But Zapier is cool. You zap things. And so it was very much an intentional thing because we started to think through like, well, we're automating stuff, we're integrating stuff, we're connecting things, we're zapping things. It just sort of felt, I don't know, it just felt natural. It felt at home. It felt like a fit. So that piece was definitely very intentional in terms of how we wanted to go brand the company and brand what we were doing. And then what was the other part you were asking was like the path to product market fit.
How did you think about getting to an MVP and then just building something that just clicked with consumers?
Yeah. So, one of the things I mentioned a little earlier was part of how we recognize the idea might be worth pursuing is you'd go to the community forums, the customer forums of these products, of a Zendesk, a Salesforce, a MailChimp, whatever. And you would see in the forums all these requests. Hey, when will you integrate with XYZ? And we started to go like, well, that's demand right there. Like people want this thing. The question is the solution a good one? And so from that point, it was, okay, can we make this thing that actually does do the integration work? And so once we had a version of it working, I would start to go into those forums and ping people directly, message them directly, maybe track down an email address directly and just send them like a friendly email. I'm not trying to be overly salesy or anything, but just say, hey, I noticed you were looking for XYZ. Did you find a solution for it that you liked? If not, I've got a project that I'm working on that might be able to solve this. And I was curious if you might want to take a look and see if it fits the bill. And, people would reply back saying, oh, I've solved it, or no, I haven't. Do you connect this XYZ? And, I remember the first person I that replied back, they're like, this would be great. And so I shot them a link to get going. And, we're a fan of self-serve. We wanted to create this easy to use thing. And so we shot him the link, half thinking like, oh, he'll just be off to the races from there. And he emails me back and he goes, wait, I'm having a little trouble. You think you could jump on Skype? It was Skype at the time and help me out. And so we get on Skype and, watch him try and set up this app. And the product is not very good at this point in time. Like it's not a beta. It's not even alpha. It's like a pre-alpha. I don't know why I thought he would be able to set it up. Nothing to do with his capabilities and everything to do with the state of the product. And, we're just going through and I'm smiling, helping him. But in the back of my head, I'm going, oh my gosh, this is so bad. This is so bad. This is so bad. But we get to the end. And at the end, we want to test this app. I say, he's got a form on one side and an email marketing tool on the other. And so when he completes, we're going to send it over the email marketing tool. So we go fill out his form, click submit, and we say, let's go to the email marketing tool. Let's check. Did the email come through? Pull it up. It comes up. It's there. He goes, Wade, this is so cool. This is going to change how I do business. And in the back of my head, I was like, holy cow. He just went through this incredibly bad setup process. He needed help every step of the way. And his reaction is not one of frustration. It's one of excitement. And so that's where I was like, okay, we're on the right problem. This is going to work if we can just make the software good enough. And so then the iteration problem to get to that product market fit was then just rinse, wash, and repeating. So I had a bunch of notes where I was like, okay, Bryan, Mike, here are all the areas that are not good enough in the product. Like we have to make this easier to use in some way. And so we try and fix some of those things. And then the next person, we get on Skype and we do it all over again. And we'd say like, okay, this, and this was the problem this time, and just keep going. And, you repeat that long enough and, some of those problems start to fade and more customers start to get further through the setup process without asking questions. And eventually you have a call where they just do it and you're just sitting back and watching and you go, you know what? I think this might work. I think we're ready to launch this thing. And so that was kind of the process we used to get to like, product market fit.
Every entrepreneur listening right now is giving you a virtual high five because oh my gosh. I mean, that's such a good way to encapsulate, the entrepreneurial journey.
Journey. Yep.
That moment where you feel like you created something that delighted at least one user. Now, I got to get you off the hot seat, but not before you answer one last very important question for me. So think back to that kid from Mizzou who was playing sax in a jazz band, and now think about where you've become. The CEO of an 800 plus person company, delighting millions of users every day. What are some of the points in that journey where you look back on and you're like, man, I didn't know I could do that, and I just did it. And I imagine there have been a bunch of those, but just like talk us through, how, you reflect on some of the milestones.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting transition. Starting a company was never something I thought growing up. Like that seems like something other people do, smarter people do, like innovative people do. That's not me. Then you do that and you're like, okay, maybe I can do that. Building software, it's like, I don't know how to do that. That's not me. And then you learn a few things and you're like, oh, I can do that. Getting someone to pay you a dollar on the internet, like that's I don't know, other people know how to do. Can I do that? And then you do it and you make a buck there. Hiring your first person, getting accepted into something like YC, Y Combinator, making your first $1 million, like stuff like that are all things, steps along the way that, as a kid from Mizzou, it just not something I was like, oh, I can do that. That's going to be part of my path. And then along the way, you start to tackle enough of these things that, look, the imposter syndrome never goes away. You never wake up in the morning thinking like, I've got this. I 100% have that nailed. If someone does feel that way, I'd love to know what your trick is, because it's not me. But what does happen is you just get more confident in your problem solving abilities because you've seen enough of these things that you're like, well, I didn't know how to do those things either, and I figured it out. So, well, let's go. Here's the next one. Let's go see if we can figure this one out. And it just becomes, I don't know. It's like, it's like playing Mario or Zelda growing up, where it was like the next level gets a little harder. And you're like, what puzzle do I have next? I may not be able to beat this, but like, if I keep trying, like maybe I'll figure it out. And so that to me has kind of been the approach to the journey, I guess.
What's the next level for Wade personally? The next level in the Mario game, something
Yeah.
you look up ahead to and say, I just can't do that. I can't climb that wall. The mountain's too high. But you're like, I don't know. The mountain seemed really high in the past and I climbed it. Like, what's that next thing?
Well, we talk a lot about making automation work for everybody and really providing this set of tools that puts computers to work for humanity. And, you mentioned the 2.5 million folks that are using Zapier inside of work today. And we go, we're proud of that. But that's a pretty long way from everyone. And so, okay, what's the next stair step there? And it's like, is that going from 2.5 million, customers to 25 million? Is that, launching new products that sort of solve automation from a different way, a different angle that open it up to a whole new host of people? Those are the problems. Those are the questions we ask ourselves to say like, okay, how are we going to get to that dream of, truly making automation work for all?
I love that you immediately went there, making automation work for all. It's not how much money we're going to make, or it's not about adding a zero to the ARR. It was first and foremost. I know that was just a genuine reaction. It's about, achieving a vision of automation for everyone. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, money is a tool to solve problems for us. And, I like the idea of computers just taking more hassle away from us. It should just work better for us. Let's figure that out.
Well, Wade, I'm obviously a big fan of the product and you and the work that your team have done, but mostly, even though it sounds kind of dramatic, I'd say, I'm on Team Zapier because, I'm on Team Human, and just the way you describe, generative AI and you need to exercise it responsibly and how it fits into your overall vision. That's unique. And that's why I'm rooting for you.
I love it.
Yeah. Hey, we're out of time. I know this one flew by, but Thanks for hanging out. I really enjoyed this conversation, Wade.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dan.
Good. Well, as you achieve those next milestones, maybe we'll have you back for another version of this sometime later. Would that be okay?
That sounds great.
All right, we'll do it. Well, gosh, that's all the time we have for this week on AI and the future of work. As always, I'm your host, Dan Turchin from People Rain. And of course, if you like what we do, please give us a like or a share or a comment in your favorite podcast app. And as always, we are back next week with another fascinating guest.